White CEO tried to kick her out. The black woman's $3.4 billion decision ended it all. Hello everyone, before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. Get her away from me. The command cracked through the ballroom like a whip. Crystal glasses froze mid-air. Conversations collapsed into a stunned hush. At the center table draped in ivory linen, lit by chandeliers heavy with fire, the white CEO leaned forward, finger extended, voice sharp with practiced authority. Her silver dress caught the light. Her jaw was set. This was not a request. It was a verdict. Across from her sat the black woman in green. One shoulder bare, posture straight, hands resting calmly beside a place setting of gold-rimmed china and untouched champagne. She did not flinch. She did not speak. Her eyes lifted steady, unblinking, meeting the accusation without apology. Around them, the room chose its posture. Some guests looked away, suddenly fascinated by their plates. Others leaned in, phones rising like dark birds sensing spectacle. A waiter stalled beside a candle, unsure whether to move. Two security staff at the edge of the carpet exchanged a glance. Power, after all, prefers momentum. The CEO laughed once, thin and incredulous. I said away, she repeated, louder now, letting the syllable land on the woman's skin. This table is for principals. A ripple of nervous amusement followed, soft, brittle, obedient. Someone whispered, who is she? Another answered, no idea. The chandelier hummed faintly as if the room itself were holding its breath. The woman in green folded her napkin with meticulous care. The fabric whispered. She placed it beside her plate. Still no words. Stillness, dense, deliberate, settled around her like gravity. The silence felt heavier than the insult. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to Ariana Cole. The CEO misread the quiet as compliance. She straightened, satisfied, already turning toward the head of the table. Security, she said, with the casual cruelty of someone accustomed to obedience, please escort. Ariana Cole reached for her glass. Not to drink. Just to move it. The stem chimed softly as it met the table again, an almost invisible sound that cut through the room more cleanly than shouting ever could. Several heads snapped back. A man in a navy tuxedo swallowed hard. Somewhere, a phone camera steadied. Ariana's gaze traveled, not hurried, not defiant, taking in the room as if inventorying assets. Marble. Candlelight. Old money smiles. The CEO's reflection fractured in polished silverware. Is there a problem? Ariana asked at last. Her voice was even. Unraised. It carried anyway. The CEO blinked, annoyed at the interruption. Yes, she said. You. Ariana nodded once, as if noting a data point. Then say it plainly. The room tightened. The CEO's smile sharpened. You don't belong here. That sentence landed. Heavy. Public. Final. Ariana didn't answer right away. She reached into her clutch, withdrew her phone, and unlocked it with a measured touch. No panic. No hurry. Just intention. A name flashed briefly on the screen before she turned it face down again. Across the table, a woman in pearls leaned toward her husband. Wait, she whispered. Cole, did she say Cole? He shook his head, uncertain, eyes flicking to the banner behind the dais, sponsors scrolling in soft light. Security took a step forward, then stopped. Something in Ariana's composure disrupted the script. Authority hesitates when it senses it might be borrowing power it doesn't own. The CEO scoffed. "This is ridiculous," she said, waving a hand. "We're on a schedule." Ariana's eyes returned to her. Calm. Assessing. "So am I." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Candles guttered. The orchestra at the far end of the hall faltered, a violinist missing a note. Ariana's thumb brushed her phone once more. A message sent. Nothing dramatic. No theatrics. Just a decision made clean, precise, worth $3.4 billion. She rose then. Slowly. The green silk caught the light as she stood to her full height, not towering, commanding. Conversations died completely. Even the CEO's breath hitched, though she didn't yet know why. Ariana inclined her head, a courtesy offered to the room, not to the woman who had tried to erase her. "Proceed," she said quietly. And somewhere beyond the ballroom, beyond the chandeliers and the confident laughter, systems began to shift. Contracts paused. Calls went unanswered. An evening-built uncertainty started to come undone. The room didn't erupt. It didn't protest. It adjusted. That was how power revealed itself, not in outrage, but in alignment. Chairs shifted subtly. A laugh died halfway through a breath. Someone cleared their throat and failed to finish the sound. The chandelier light remained warm, indulgent, but the air beneath it cooled by degrees no thermostat could explain. Ariana Cole stood beside her chair, neither advancing nor retreating. She had become a fixed point, and the room, trained by decades of deference, began to reorient around her without admitting it was doing so. At the far end of the table, a hedge fund partner in a midnight blue tuxedo glanced at his wife. She shook her head once. "Not now. Not here. Not against whatever this was becoming." He folded his napkin again, slower this time, eyes never leaving Ariana's face. The CEO sensed it before she understood it. She felt the drag on her authority, the way momentum hesitates when belief fractures. Her smile tightened. "We're moving on," she said briskly, clapping once as if to summon the evening back into obedience. "Let's not turn a scheduling error into a spectacle." A scheduling error. The phrase landed poorly. A few guests exchanged looks, quick, precise, the language of people who traded risk for a living. One man leaned toward his neighbor and whispered, "That's not how errors stand." Another murmured, "Who stands like that?" Ariana didn't answer. She watched. She listened. The room was speaking now, even if it refused to raise its voice. Security remained where they were. The younger guard shifted his weight, then stilled, eyes flicking to the older one. The older guard's gaze lingered on Ariana's phone, face down on the table, as if it were a sealed envelope containing a verdict he wasn't authorized to open. At a nearby table, a woman with a foundation pin tapped her glass twice, absent-minded, nervous. "Cole," she whispered, testing the name like a key. "Cole. Capital." Her companion frowned, then stiffened, memory clicking into place. "No," he said softly. "Cole Global." Across the room, a sponsor banner cycled through logos in elegant restraint. The font shifted. The lighting changed. For a fraction of a second, a familiar word passed unnoticed by most and caught by a few: Cole. The cycle continued. The moment moved on. The damage did not. The CEO waved for wine. The sommelier approached and stopped short, unsure where to pour. The CEO snapped her fingers. "Here," she said, irritated. The sommelier hesitated just a heartbeat too long. "Enough." Ariana spoke again, quietly. "You should sit." It wasn't an order. It wasn't a threat. It was an observation delivered with the calm certainty of someone reading a clock. The CEO's head turned sharply. "Excuse me." Ariana met her eyes. "This is the part where rooms decide." The sentence spread without sound. A man at the head table straightened, suddenly aware of cameras he hadn't noticed before. A senator's aide slid a phone back into a pocket. Someone else put theirs down. The orchestra attempted to resume. The tempo slipped. The conductor lowered his baton. Ariana reached for her clutch, not theatrically, not to display anything. She withdrew a slim card and placed it beside her plate. A donation pledge, embossed, understated. The host passing behind her caught a glimpse and stopped. His breath hitched. He nodded once, almost imperceptibly, and kept moving faster now. The CEO's confidence began to shed its sheen. "This is absurd," she said, to no one in particular. "We're not." A phone vibrated. Then another. A third. Screens lit up like a constellation, forming all at once. Whispers threaded the tables, tighter, quicker. Words like pause, review, effective slipped between linen and glass. Ariana picked up her phone not to check it, but to end the scene. "Please," she said, with the politeness reserved for doors that were already closing. "Continue." She didn't need to look back to know the room had chosen. The evening had shifted from ceremony to consequence. And whatever came next would not be loud. It would be official. They decided who she was within seconds. Not aloud, never aloud, but through the quiet arithmetic of assumption. The kind people learn early and practice often. Clothes minus pedigree. Skin plus silence. Presence without invitation. The equation resolved neatly in their minds. Ariana Cole became a category. A guest of a guest, perhaps. A donor's companion. A consultant who had wandered too close to the center of the room. Something temporary. Something removable. A woman at the corner table leaned toward her friend and murmured, "She's very composed." The word composed carried a caveat, as if calm were suspicious when worn by the wrong person. Her friend nodded. "Maybe she's staff," he said, unsure. "No, too confident." He watched Ariana as if confidence were a borrowed coat that might slip at any moment. The CEO clung to that uncertainty like a lifeline. She told herself this was a misunderstanding she could outweigh. She'd seen it before, outsiders stiffening under pressure, hoping dignity would pass for leverage. They always folded. Eventually. She lifted her glass again, deliberately ignoring Ariana, and addressed the table with practiced ease. "Let's proceed," she said, smiling wide enough to suggest closure. "We have donors to thank." Ariana remained standing. Still. Present. That, more than defiance, unsettled them. A man with a venture capital pin checked his watch, then checked it again. He leaned to his colleague. "If she's nobody," he whispered, "why hasn't she left?" The colleague didn't answer. His eyes were on Ariana's hand, steady, unadorned, empty of tells. Across the room, the host scanned the seating chart again. He knew every name on it. He knew who paid for the flowers, who sponsored the orchestra, who demanded the center tables, and who settled for proximity. He did not see Ariana's name where it should have been. That absence bothered him more than her presence. A server approached with a tray and paused beside Ariana. "Would you like," she began, then stopped, uncertain whether the question itself would offend someone else. Ariana smiled faintly. "I'm fine," she said. The server exhaled, grateful, and moved on. The CEO noticed. Her jaw tightened. Control was leaking in small, irritating ways. She turned, ready to press again, to restate the rules, when a sound reached her ear that didn't belong. Laughter. Soft. From the wrong place. It came from a table near the windows, where three people sat too quietly to be harmless. One of them, a woman with silver hair and an audit committee badge, had tilted her head, studying Ariana with fresh interest. "That's her," she said, almost to herself. The CEO stiffened. "Who?" she asked sharply. The woman didn't answer. She was already pulling out her phone, scrolling, comparing. A name. A photo that didn't exist publicly. A silhouette she recognized from boardrooms where decisions were made without ceremony. Ariana felt the shift, not triumph, not relief, but inevitability. This was always how it happened. Not with announcements, but with recognition spreading like a change in pressure. She remembered the first time it had happened to her. Years ago. A glass office. A bank manager who wouldn't meet her eyes. "Come back when you have something real," he'd said. She had smiled then, too. She had learned patience early. The CEO laughed again, louder now, trying to reclaim the rhythm. "Honestly," she said, "some people mistake access for importance." Ariana turned toward her fully for the first time. "And some," she replied, gently, "mistake familiarity for authority." The words didn't bite. They settled. Silence followed, not shocked, not offended, but attentive. The room had moved past guessing. It was recalibrating. They were beginning to understand they had misread the moment. And Ariana Cole had no intention of correcting them yet. Power didn't arrive. It surfaced. Not with an announcement, not with applause, but with recognition, quiet, contagious, irreversible. It moved through the ballroom like a change in barometric pressure, subtle enough to deny, strong enough to obey. Ariana Cole remained where she was, a constant in a room suddenly full of variables. Near the sponsor dais, a man with a venture firm crest loosened his cufflinks. He leaned toward the woman beside him, voice barely moving the air. "If she's here," he said, "then this isn't a social event. It's a checkpoint." The woman nodded, eyes never leaving Ariana. She had stopped pretending to sip her drink. At another table, a donor who had funded 3 wings of the museum checked his phone again. The message hadn't changed, but his interpretation had. "Pending review." He felt the word pending widen beneath his feet. The CEO sensed the drift, authority slipping its leash. She straightened her shoulders and raised her voice, calibrated to carry without sounding strained. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, smiling with effort, "let's refocus. Tonight is about unity." Unity landed flat. No one clapped. Ariana watched the attempt pass without comment. She knew this moment well, the phase where power pretends it hasn't noticed the room turning. Where it insists on ceremony to mask calculation. A man from legal compliance, invited late, seated near the aisle, recognized Ariana fully now. He didn't smile. He didn't react. He simply closed his notebook. The action was small, but it was decisive. He was done observing. At the edge of the ballroom, the host received a text and stopped mid-step. His face drained of color, then settled into something careful. He looked up, found Ariana's eyes, and gave a brief nod. Not gratitude. Not fear. Acknowledgement. The CEO followed his gaze and felt a flicker of unease she didn't yet understand. "What is going on?" she asked sharply. Ariana answered without raising her voice. "Momentum." That word carried. It landed on tables where deals were measured in years and undone in seconds. It slipped into the spaces between conversations and changed their direction. Someone laughed nervously and failed to stop. Another guest stood, then sat back down, unsure of protocol that no longer applied. The orchestra remained silent. The conductor didn't lift his baton again. Ariana reached for her phone, not to check messages, but to end them. She turned it off and placed it back into her clutch. The choice was deliberate. Whatever had been set in motion no longer required supervision. Across the table, the CEO's confidence thinned to irritation. This is inappropriate, she said, sharper now. You've made your point. Ariana's expression didn't change. I haven't, she replied. The room has. Silence followed, thick, collective, instructive. No one contradicted her. At a nearby table, a woman whispered, "We should leave." Her partner shook his head. "Not yet," he said. "I want to see who's still standing." The CEO glanced around for allies and found caution instead. People avoided her eyes not out of disrespect, but self-preservation. She had become a liability in real time. Ariana took a step not forward, not back, but sideways, reclaiming space that had been denied her minutes earlier. The movement was minimal. The effect was not. Somewhere in the building, a deal expired quietly. Somewhere else, a meeting was cancelled without explanation. Systems adjusted. Access narrowed. Doors that had always been open began to close. Ariana felt none of it as triumph. Only confirmation. The power in the room was no longer invisible. It was deciding. The decision had already been made. What the room was witnessing now was not hesitation, not escalation, but confirmation. Ariana Cole had crossed the point where reaction mattered. Everything beyond this moment was execution. She didn't sit back down. That would have suggested debate. Instead, she reached into her clutch once more and removed her phone, not with urgency, but with the unremarkable precision of someone checking the time. The screen lit her face for a second. No one could see what it said, but several people leaned forward anyway, as if proximity might grant them clearance. The CEO scoffed. "This is unbelievable," she muttered, half to herself, half to the room. "We're indulging theatrics now." Ariana didn't look at her. She scrolled once. Stopped. Then typed. Not a message filled with words. Not an argument. A single action, executed inside a system built for moments exactly like this. A clause triggered. A threshold crossed. The kind of mechanism designed to operate without emotion. 3 floors above the ballroom, a notification appeared on a secure dashboard. It did not announce itself. It did not ask permission. It simply changed a status from active to suspended. In another building, in another city, a call was routed and then quietly dropped. An assistant stared at her screen, refreshed it, and frowned. She tried again. The result didn't change. Back in the ballroom, Ariana placed the phone face down on the table. The sound soft plastic meeting linen was barely audible. It carried anyway. A man who had negotiated billion-dollar mergers for 20 years felt his stomach tighten. He recognized that sound. It was the sound of finality disguised as politeness. "Did she just?" someone whispered. "No," another replied, already shaking his head. "She wouldn't do that. Not here." Ariana straightened the edge of the tablecloth with 2 fingers. "It's done," she said, not loudly, not proudly. Simply as a statement of record. The CEO laughed sharply. "What's done?" she demanded. "You don't get to derail an entire evening because your feelings are hurt." Ariana finally met her gaze. "This has nothing to do with feelings." The distinction mattered. It reframed everything. A guest near the aisle checked his phone and went pale. "That's impossible," he murmured, scrolling faster now. His partner leaned in. "What is it?" He didn't answer. He couldn't yet. The CEO's assistant approached from behind, phone pressed to her ear, panic bleeding through professional restraint. There's an issue," she whispered. "The partnership, our biggest one, it's been flagged. All activity is paused." The CEO waved her off, annoyed. "Handle it." The assistant didn't move. "They won't let me," she said. "It's locked at the board level." Silence fell again, this time sharper. Ariana spoke with the same calm she'd carried all night. I asked for respect, she said. When that wasn't possible, I chose structure. A few people exhaled. Others swallowed. Everyone understood what structure meant. Systems. Leverage. Consequences that did not require raised voices or public shaming. The CEO looked around, searching for a face that would steady her. She found none. Allies had become observers. Observers had become liabilities. Reverse it, she said, her voice thinning. Whatever you think you did, reverse it. Ariana shook her head once. It doesn't work that way. She picked up her clutch, the movement unhurried. $3.4 billion, she added, not as a threat, but as context. Is a lot of trust to misplace. The room absorbed the number like a body absorbs impact instantly, involuntarily. Ariana stepped away from the table. Behind her, the evening continued to collapse, not loudly, not publicly, but efficiently. Invitations would be reconsidered. Phone calls would go unanswered. And by morning, the decision made in silence would be reported as inevitable. Because it was. The collapse didn't sound like breaking glass. It sounded like phones vibrating at the same time. One after another, screens lit up across the ballroom, subtle at first, then unmistakable. Executives glanced down, frowned, refreshed. The same words appeared in different fonts, from different systems, carrying the same meaning: on hold. Under review. Temporarily suspended. A man near the window stood abruptly, chair legs scraping the floor. He checked himself, sat back down, and forced a smile that fooled no one. Just stepping out for a call, he said, already dialing. The call went unanswered. He tried again. Voicemail. At the head table, the CEO's assistant stared at her screen as if it might change its mind. It didn't. She swallowed and leaned in again. Legal won't pick up, she whispered. Compliance says they were notified directly. By who? The CEO hissed. The assistant hesitated. Cole Global. The name fell like a weight. Conversations fractured. Guests leaned toward one another, voices tight and low. This can't be right. It's probably a glitch. No, look at the timestamp. Someone laughed, too loudly, then stopped. The orchestra packed their instruments without instruction. The conductor didn't argue. He had already received the message: brief, polite, final. Please stand by. Ariana moved toward the aisle, unhurried, the green silk of her dress whispering against the carpet. As she passed, people straightened instinctively. A man stepped aside, then another. Space opened without being asked for. Behind her, the CEO tried to regain altitude. Everyone, she said, lifting her voice, there's been a misunderstanding. We're addressing it. No one looked at her. A sponsor pulled his badge from his lapel and slipped it into his pocket, as if it might burn him. A donor typed a message, then deleted it, then typed again. We should talk. He didn't send it. At the far end of the room, the host received another text and closed his eyes. When he opened them, he scanned the exits, calculating logistics, reputational fallout, the cost of delay. He signaled to staff with a small, efficient gesture. The bar stopped serving. The CEO noticed. Panic crept into her voice. Why is service paused? No one answered. Ariana reached the edge of the ballroom and stopped. Not to watch the damage but to mark its completion. She turned back once, addressing the room as a whole. This isn't personal, she said. It's procedural. A few people nodded. Others exhaled. They understood that distinction better than most. A man who had mocked her earlier cleared his throat. Ms. Cole, he began, tentative, already too late. Ariana's gaze moved past him. If you need to leave, she said calmly, now would be wise. Chairs scraped. People stood. Coats were retrieved. The exits filled with purposeful movement. No announcements. No instructions. The room was evacuating its own liability. The CEO remained at the table, hands braced on the linen, knuckles pale. You can't do this, she said, to the air, to the chandeliers, to a power that had already passed her by. Ariana met her eyes one last time. I didn't, she replied. You did. She turned and walked out. Behind her, the gala unraveled with remarkable efficiency. Deals dissolved into disclaimers. Alliances recalculated. By the time the doors closed, the collapse was complete, not dramatic, not public but absolute. And it had only just begun. The realization didn't strike all at once. It arrived in waves, uneven, humiliating, impossible to outrun. In the corridor outside the ballroom, conversation stopped mid-sentence as Ariana Cole passed. People turned, then corrected themselves, suddenly aware of how quickly posture could betray allegiance. A man who had laughed earlier now stood too straight. A woman who had avoided eye contact found it, held it, then nodded, as if late recognition could be mistaken for respect. Inside the ballroom, the atmosphere had curdled. The tables remained set, immaculate, untouched. Linen smooth. Silverware aligned. But the certainty that had once filled the space was gone, replaced by calculation. People checked the exits not because they feared danger, but because they feared proximity. Someone whispered, "It's her." Someone else replied, "I know." A third asked, "How did we miss it?" The question lingered without an answer anyone wanted to give. At the head table, the CEO sat rigid, staring at nothing. Her phone buzzed again. She didn't check it this time. She already knew what it would say. The world she'd curated through access, intimidation, unchallenged assumption was correcting itself without her consent. Across the room, a journalist who had come for donor photos quietly closed her notebook. This wasn't a story she could write yet. It required confirmation. Names. A timeline. She typed a single message instead, "Is it true?" The reply came back immediately. Yes. The host approached the CEO with careful steps. "We should consider ending the evening early," he said, voice neutral, professional. The phrasing was generous. It offered dignity where none had been earned. The CEO didn't look at him. "You're making a mistake," she said. He hesitated, then shook his head. "No," he replied. "We already did." Around them, the room rearranged its loyalties in plain sight. People who had once orbited the CEO now clustered elsewhere, around exits, around conversations that felt safer, around the absence Ariana had left behind. Her presence lingered more powerfully now that she was gone. A donor with an international foundation badge leaned toward his colleague. "If Cole Global pulled out," he said quietly, "others will follow." The colleague nodded. "Already are." The orchestra case lid snapped shut. Staff began clearing glasses. No one had finished. The gala was ending not because the night was over but because the hierarchy had inverted. Someone finally said it aloud. She owned the leverage. The sentence passed through the room like absolution and indictment combined. At the edge of the ballroom, a woman who had smiled politely through the insult earlier pressed her lips together. "I should have said something," she murmured. Her companion didn't disagree. He just said, "Next time." That was the cost. Not outrage. Not scandal. Memory. Outside, Ariana paused beneath the portico as her driver opened the door. The night air was cool, steady. She exhaled once, not in relief, but in completion. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't defended her worth. She had simply allowed the truth to arrive. Inside, the CEO stood at last. The room parted not in reverence, but in distance. She gathered her things with shaking hands, aware now of every eye she'd once commanded. No one stopped her. By the time the doors closed behind her, the narrative had already shifted. Not from rumor to fact but from power to consequence. And everyone who remained understood the same thing, with startling clarity. They had mistaken silence for absence. They would not make that mistake again. The reveal didn't come with a microphone. It came with confirmation. In the lobby, beneath the muted glow of recessed lights, a small knot of people stood too close together, phones angled inward, voices lowered. A name surfaced again, this time without uncertainty. Ariana Cole, someone said. Founder. Majority holder. Another added, she chairs the Capital Committee. A third finished it, almost reverently, she decides what survives. The words moved faster than footsteps. By the time Ariana's car pulled away from the curb, the truth had already reached the ballroom, filtered, verified, undeniable. Inside, the CEO learned last. Her assistant returned, pale and composed in the way professionals get when the damage is complete. It's public, she said quietly. The board acknowledged the pause. Press will follow by morning. Pause what? The CEO snapped, grasping for fragments. The partnership, the assistant replied. All of them. The CEO stared. All. Yes, came the answer. Anything tied to Cole Global. The room seemed to tilt. Chairs felt farther away. Faces blurred into a single, judging mass. The CEO understood now, not the insult, not the moment but the scale. This hadn't been a donor. Or a guest. Or a misunderstanding. It had been the axis. A man from finance approached, careful not to crowd her. She owns the structure, he said, gently. Not the spectacle. That's why you didn't see it? The CEO said nothing. There was nothing left to say that wouldn't sound like pleading. Across the room, the host addressed a cluster of remaining guests. Ms. Cole has stepped down from tonight's program, he said, choosing every word. Out of respect, we'll be concluding early. No one objected. Someone whispered, she let us decide. Another replied, no, she let us reveal ourselves. The banner behind the dais cycled once more. Cole Global appeared and passed, unnoticed by no one this time. It didn't linger. It didn't need to. In a quiet corner, a woman who had watched in silence all evening pressed her hand to her mouth. She never asked for anything, she said. She didn't have to. That was the lesson settling into place. Outside, Ariana's phone vibrated once, an acknowledgement, not a request. She didn't look at it. The decision had already propagated. Systems were aligning. Statements were being drafted by people who now understood the cost of misreading dignity. Inside, the CEO gathered her coat. No one offered help. As she walked toward the exit, conversations resumed behind her, not about her, but beyond her. The center had moved. By the time she reached the doors, the reveal was complete. Not as a declaration. As a fact. Morning reframed everything. By the time daylight reached the glass towers downtown, the story had finished telling itself. Headlines would come later, careful, sanitized, technical, but the outcome was already settled in boardrooms and inboxes where decisions carried weight. The partnership was dissolved. Not dramatically. Not angrily. Quietly, through language that favored inevitability over blame. Clauses were cited. Timelines adjusted. Capital reallocated. What had been assumed permanent was revealed to be conditional all along. Cole Global issued no statement. It didn't need to. In the days that followed, invitations were rescinded. Committees reshuffled. A chair once considered untouchable was vacated under the polite pretense of transition. The CEO accepted the language offered to her, grateful for its mercy, aware of its limits. power, she learned too late, was not granted by position. It was tolerated by consequence. Across the city, Ariana Cole returned to work. She met with her team, reviewed numbers, approved a redistribution plan that redirected funds toward initiatives that never received gala invitations, a scholarship endowment, a compliance overhaul, a requirement, written plainly, that dignity was not optional. No interviews. No victory laps. Those who knew what had happened spoke about it differently now. Not as a scandal, but as a correction. A recalibration. Proof that systems could still recognize their owners even when those owners chose not to announce themselves. At another event weeks later, a younger woman hesitated before entering a room like that ballroom. She adjusted her posture. Stepped forward anyway. No one stopped her. That was the echo. Ariana never mentioned the night again. Not because it didn't matter but because it had already done its work. Justice, she believed, was most effective when it didn't ask to be admired. What lingered was not the humiliation, or the number attached to it, but the lesson the room had learned together. Silence is not absence. Stillness is not weakness. And dignity, once recognized, rearranges everything around it. In the end, no one remembered the chandelier, the dress, or the command to remove her. They remembered the moment the room realized it had been wrong. And the woman who didn't need to say a word to prove it.